Guess what? We're still giving away money. But in addition to giving you $1,000, we're going to be talking about your credit score, protecting your identity, and covering all the things you want to know about this whole Equifax breach as well.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy, restoring order to your financial chaos, retirement, investing, taxes. You've got financial questions, he's got financial answers. It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
So, Bo, you've heard me tease it. We still got the $1,000 YouTube giveaway that we're offering to our podcast listeners that have decided to cross over and not only listen to our audio, that southern accent that obviously keeps you guys coming back for more. If you want to see what we look like, definitely go check us out at youtube.com/moneyguyshow. We are doing a $1,000 giveaway for all subscribers. Well, not all. There'll be a drawing. Let me clarify that. There'll be a drawing. Might go broke.
You just gave away thousands of dollars, I feel
There'll be a drawing mid-November, right before Thanksgiving. We're going to be pulling anybody who's subscribed. And by the way, if you're already in, thank you. We've already gotten hundreds of you that have signed up. We know there's thousands of you listening, and we'd like to kind of turn those hundreds into thousands. So please check us out, youtube.com/moneyguyshow. And we're going to try to hook up with $1,000. And we have other ideas that are coming down the pipe too. So go ahead and get involved and get signed up. And that's a great segue into, if you go check us out at moneyguy.com, you can obviously go check out the show notes.
Yep.
You can also subscribe to get updates anytime we come up with new content. And then I'd encourage you to join the Smart Money Club. The Smart Money Club is going to give you access to all of our archives all the way back to 2006. That's right. We've been doing this for going on 12 years now. Yep. So this is decades in the making. So definitely go check us out, moneyguy.com, if you want to stay connected. And then last thing before we get into the meat of this, because this is a heavy show today on credit worthiness and understanding your credit score, is just that we have clients in the majority of the country now from this podcast. Right. I'm flying up to Boston. I'll be back by the time this show actually broadcasts. And a lot of that is because of the podcast and us getting clients listeners to go to the next level. If you want to take the relationship to the next level, we'd love to have you reach out to one of our contact sections on both aboundwealth.com or moneyguy.com. We have contact pages there where you can reach out to us and become one of the family.
Yep. I think that's great, Brian. And I'm actually really excited about today's show because unless you've been living under a rock, you most likely have heard what's going on with this Equifax data breach. So I think what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of break down what was the data breach, what happened, what was exposed, what's the risk, and then we're going to kind of walk through every piece of what you need to know about it, about your credit, about protecting yourself, right?
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me, I mean, here's the I think this stuff comes out so much about breaches, hackers, and all the terminology that's used that you kind of get numb to it. And I know, I mean, I think everybody suffers from that. You know, you get callous to a degree as this happens so much that people go, well, what's so big deal?
Sure.
Why is this a big deal? And I want to wake you up a little bit on this episode because I'm the same way. I don't like scare tactics. And I feel like so much in the financial media as well as just general things where they're trying to get eyeballs on their products, they will scare the heck out of you to try to get you there. That's not the way we operate here at the Money Guy Show. But this one is a little different. I mean, a typical breach, it's not that big. It is a big deal. I don't want to downplay it too much, but it doesn't impact your daily life as much as I think this one is. And let me explain what I mean by that. First of all, what happened was 143 million Americans. And this, by the way, this went beyond America. There's actually Canadians and others that were impacted. I'm just talking about there's 143 Americans that their data was put forth to criminal elements. They were able to go in and actually see the data. And what makes this so hard and different from others is like when you see a credit card company have a breach, they usually get credit card numbers. They might get a social security number, but they don't get a lot more data other than that. So you very well could see some bad charges on your credit card. And it's the hassle for your life is you have to call the credit card company, get a new credit card issued, and you move on with your life.
And so I just want to make sure, because tell me if this number is right. There's like 300 million people in America. Is that the right number?
I mean, this is approaching 50% of the population.
It's one out of every. So if you're listening to this podcast, if you're somebody sitting out there, odds are there's a high likelihood, 50%, that you are somehow affected by what happened with this data breach.
Right.
Is that a correct assessment?
That is very true. And here's why it's even higher up on the, I guess, fear scale is that not only do they get your social security number, they got your date of birth, they have your contact information, and in some people's case, they even have your driver's license number.
Wow.
So if you start thinking about what's worst case scenario of how can somebody could pretend to be me if they know your social security number, your date of birth, your driver's license number, they pretty much have a checkmate. And that's what makes this stuff evergreen. And that's why we have to really talk about this is because fast forward 3 years, 4 years down the road, is your date of birth going to change? No. I mean, we only get one date of birth. Is your social security number going to change? No. I mean, so this is why this is wake up a little bit more than you normally do because your fear scale should definitely be higher than a typical credit card breach. So we're going to be talking about that today and on how you need to protect yourself. Before we get into the protection side, I first want to bring people back because I know we have a lot of people who come to us from other financial media, where people, even if you're a person that's a cash person, you don't do credit at all. You're like, well, I'm off the grid. I don't care about credit. Why is that even pertain to me? I want to talk about the importance of good credit because it does come into play and not just in a debt basis, but just in how you're treated from a lot of places you do business. So we're going to be talking about how credit not only deals with your debt, but it also deals with things that day-to-day life. So we're going to go into that. The second thing is I want to talk about now after we hear about the importance of it, let's talk about the components. What makes up your credit score? What are you being rated on? What is determining what's considered good and what's considered bad? And then we're going to close out the show and probably spend the majority of the show really talking about what happens when things go bad, or even if they're not bad, because hopefully you're part of the 50% of the population that's not impacted. What steps can you take just to monitor your credit and be very proactive? Because if we find out, as we're going to talk about here shortly, how important this is to your day-to-day life, you got to make sure you're being proactive. And with technology, it's gotten easier, but it's still, you need to be very much paying attention and taking an active role in your life with your credit.
Sure.
So let's kind of just jump into these, Bo. The first thing I had was I want to talk about the importance of good credit. And I figured the way we do this, the Money Guy style, is that we would not only just talk about some of the components, we talk about good behaviors just in general in credit, because I know that a lot of our listeners, you guys avoid credit as much as you possibly can. So I want to encourage that. I like people paying off their debts, being out of as much debt as possible. So if we can throw some anecdotal information in there to also give you some education, we're going to make sure that we do it. So the first thing is interest rates are obviously impacted by your credit rating. And then the reason that is because credit rating is used to predict your financial responsibility. That's why this is coming into play outside of just debt. So if you think about low-lying fruit, of course, interest rates for all debt, whether we're talking about credit cards, whether we're talking about auto loans or even mortgages. Now, I want to share some love on the fact of credit cards. We want you paying those off monthly.
Sure.
I mean, I understand there's going to be there's a lot of convenience to using credit cards. There's even, especially when you're traveling internationally, there's a lot of travel benefits. So credit cards have some benefits, but remember, don't really treat them as an ongoing debt issue. They have horrible interest rates. It's very damaging to your long-term financial independence. So make sure you're paying off your credit cards monthly, but the credit rating definitely impacts the interest rates.
And so what you're saying, if there are lines of credit like an auto loan or like a home loan where you are not paying it off monthly, it's something that you're stretching out, how good your credit is affects how good the rate is, affects how much you actually pay for what your mortgage payment is or what your car payment is, right?
Yeah, you might be paying 13.99% versus paying 21%, but still definitely punishing and punitive, but better than it's somebody who has bad credit. Auto loans, we try to tell people, obviously your credit rating is going to impact your auto loan rate, but try to pay off your auto loans within 36 months. I don't care if you take the 48 or 60 months because that gets you the 0.9% that some of the car manufacturers will offer you, but try to have it paid off within 36 months so you don't get those negative equity situations. Mortgages, we like to see people be completely debt-free by the time you are retired. So if you are quickly approaching financial independence or what you perceive as financial independence and leaving the workforce. Let's try to get you out of debt as fast as possible since you are quickly approaching. But those things definitely come into play with your credit rating on what interest rates you get. So let's talk about the non-debt impact of credit.
And I think those were pretty common sense to me. It kind of made sense. Some of these next ones, Brian, I was kind of surprised because I don't think I knew that your credit or your credit score affected a lot of these next little bullet points that you threw out there.
So this was, let's talk about stuff we probably do think about, like landlords. I mean, it is not uncommon. Landlords will use your credit rating to determine if they rent to you because think about what do most landlords do? Most of them are looking at you as paying their debt obligations. So they are in some ways lending you money by giving you use of their asset, their property. So they definitely will know that how good you are at predictability of being good with your money and paying them their rent. The second, many employers now run a credit check as due diligence on employees. They want to make sure that they feel like that you're going to be a good employee that's going to, be responsible. If you're responsible with your finances, you're probably going to be responsible with the way you live your life. Sure. So they definitely are involved with that. Here's one this is probably the shock and awe for you was insurance companies. Okay. Insurance companies, I'm talking about like your auto loans, your homeowner's insurance. You're like, well, what does my auto insurance matter what my credit is?
Because I'm not borrowing money to pay for my auto insurance.
They want to know it because it's a predictor of behavior. No different than, I come from an accounting background. It is known CPAs get better insurance rates than a lot of people in the population. Why? Because we're boring. I mean, you don't see a lot of CPAs that are skydiving. So, it's just that it lowers the risk. The analytics show that we're kind of boring. We follow rules.
I'm hoping that we get at least maybe 3 or 4 emails from you guys out there that are CPAs that are like avid skydivers.
There's not many of those. If we get those, I'll be excited because that means the population of listeners is huge. Because if there's, say 4 in the world and 1 wrote us, that means we have a lot of CPAs listening to the show. But it does, getting back on what we're talking about, is that it is used to show a predictor of your behavior. And if you're a person who's keeping up with your finances, the insurance company are thinking that you're probably taking that type of mindset, proactive mindset, and avoiding risk and other things in your life. So they give you better insurance rates, the better your credit is. So that definitely plays into it. Utility companies. If you've set up any utilities recently, one of the first things they're going to do is go, oh, we got to run a credit report on you to see if we have to collect a deposit. And what's great is when they say, and it's a pain, because here's what I always think is interesting, and this is a little bit of a sidebar. You're excited, especially when you're a first-time home buyer, say you're a young person buying your first house. Right. You're so excited to buy your house. You're qualifying for the mortgage, but you have to be very careful, as we're going to get into, is not letting too many people ding your credit
before you close,
because it will lower your credit score, and that could impact what you get on the mortgage side, which we talked about in the first section. So you're already hearing how your utility company is going to be dinging your credit score to see if you have to do a deposit right before you close on this house. It probably doesn't make sense to go to Pottery Barn, load up and get a Pottery Barn credit card right before you close on that house too, because you're going to have a bunch of inquiries, as you'll find out in a minute. Doing too many inquiries in a short period of time makes the credit card companies and the credit agencies wonder, what's going on here? Right. Is this person in trouble? So definitely understand that the utility companies are going to run your credit, and you're hoping they don't ask for a deposit. If your score is good enough and your behavior is good enough, they won't put your money in this perpetual Groundhog Day where it's just sitting out there not working for anybody. So pay attention to the utilities. So let's talk about, now that we know that credit scores go beyond just getting debt. It actually impacts your day-to-day life with insurance, utilities, your job, putting a roof over your head. Let's talk about the components of what makes good credit. What goes into your credit score?
And I think what's beautiful is if you kind of know the recipe, if you know what causes your credit score to go up or down, you can kind of, tell me if I'm wrong here, but you can kind of influence. There are some tactics you can implement that'll make your credit score a little bit better if you kind of know what goes into it.
Yeah, it's interesting. FICO score is what you are measured by your creditors. And FICO stands for Fair Isaac and Company. And these guys, they are the judge, the jury. They determine what you're going to be, how you look out there to the lending as well as insurance companies, these financial world people that are coming and looking at you. So since they are the most important people, you can understand why they keep their recipe. What goes in is a secret. It's top secret on what goes into it.
Like Coca-Cola.
But they do share some of the big things that are going on. And you need to sit up in your seat and take notice of, listen to this number. They testified before the House Financial Services Subcommittee that 10 billion decisions worldwide were determined by FICO scores. 10 billion.
Was that
that's
B,
that's with
billion
a B.
with a B?
Billion. 10 billion per year of financial decisions were made based upon these FICO scores. So you are involved in that $10 billion number. So it makes sense to at least understand what goes into a good FICO score. So let's just go through this. This is what they've released publicly, and then we're going to try to give you some tips and tricks on how to modify and make sure that you're doing good behavior that's rewarded with your credit score. So the first thing, and these are the two first components I'm mentioning, are the most powerful and make up close to 2/3 of your credit score. So you got to get these first two dead on if you want to have a good credit score. The first one is payment history. It's 35% of your credit score comes from your payment history. So you need to make sure that you're consistent, that you're making timely payments. You don't want to have payments that are paid late.
And I think what's really interesting is that just one late payment, just one missed payment can have a huge impact. So it's really, really important that you do pay on time, you pay consistently, because one misstep can be pretty significant.
Yeah, and we all make mistakes. Look, I think it's a common thing that everybody, because we're humans, we make mistakes. I would say if you do miss a payment and you get fees, you get interest and all these things put on, if it's your truly first or second one and these happen so rarely, I would recommend call the credit card company or call the lender and say, let them know if there's something in life that's going on that kind of led to this behavior. Maybe you had you moved recently, because these are the common things. You've moved. You had a sickness or illness in the family, something like this. You'd be surprised if you could go ahead and reach out. You might not only save your credit, but you might also save yourself some penalties and fees. So definitely understand being proactive and an advocate for yourself will help. So the second thing is credit utilization. 30% of your credit score is determined by credit utilization. And the best scores typically average around 7% utilization, but 10 to 20% is considered okay. Now, what we mean, because that's probably, what do we mean by credit utilization?
So credit utilization. Now, this is just looking at revolving credit. So it's not looking like your mortgage or anything like that, but it looks at how much available credit do you have. So you think in terms of like a credit card that has a $10,000 limit, how much of that limit are you utilizing on a consistent basis? So if you only have $100 that you're keeping on that credit card at any given time and there's a $10,000 limit, that's pretty healthy.
Right.
If you have a $10,000 limit and that thing's maxed out every month, you're probably not helping yourself from a utilization standpoint.
This is a big one. I will tell you something. It's kind of, because of technology, it's made me a little neurotic, is that because if you get, and I'm going to talk about in a minute when we get to monitoring and keeping up with your credit, you're going to be able to see what the credit rating agencies see from, when you get some of these services. You can actually see what they're seeing. And it annoys you when you see, you pay your credit card off monthly, but when you look at their credit utilization calculation and you notice, wait a minute, they're saying I'm using that. I know I paid that off 3 weeks ago. Remember, this thing is in a delay. So what it leads to, here's the neurotic behavior. And I know there's a lot of Money Guy listeners that are doing this because you tell me this stuff. I pay my credit cards probably twice a month. I don't mean, it's just like I'll be watching TV, watching probably some reality show, and I'll be like, it's time to pay the credit card. I got money in the bank, so let's just pay them, because I want those utilization rates to look as low as possible, especially after you've had some big months. It makes sense, and I get it. It's because you try to pay those things down as fast as possible so it doesn't look like you're using more of your credit than you actually are.
And, we talk about it all the time. We are obviously a wealth management firm here. We think we have, the best advisory team in the whole world when you look at all the folks we have here working. And one of our advisors, Carter, who you guys have heard us talk about a lot of you work with him, he actually called each one of the agencies, each one of the credit card companies to find out when they report, like what day of the month. And he has teasers set on his calendar that he pays it the day before they report, because he does exactly this. And I just think that's so incredible. But he has a really great credit score because he's willing to go that little that little extra step.
Because you heard us say that the really good scores are around 7%. Well, if you're using your credit cards, it's easy to see how you can get above 7%.
Sure. Yep.
I think what Carter does is really smart in the fact that he's also is kind of a phantom to the credit card companies, because I'm sure that utilization rate looks pretty close to zero, even though he's using the services, because he's making sure he pays it down every month before they report it.
Yep.
It's a smart planning strategy if you think about it. And that's what I love. It goes into our team. I mean, we walk the walk here at the Money Guy Show. So you get into that nerdiness when you work with us. So the second, these components get a little smaller, but still very important. The third one is length of credit history. That's 15% of your credit score. You need to keep, I have a credit card that I opened. I didn't get my first credit card until after college. That's probably a big mistake. If I could give you guys advice.
Well, that was so long ago. I'm sure.
Yeah,
it was way back there, right?
Let me keep those old credit lines. Here's the first advice, and then I want to kind of take it into a slight sidebar, is that when you're in college, it's a unique time, is that credit card companies are trying to get access to you.
Sure.
They feel like you have low risk for multiple reasons. First, you're in college, so they think, okay, this person's going to be gainfully employed, make decent income, so we want to go ahead and grab them while they're in this formative stage of their life. The second thing is most people who are in college have parents that will kind of step in potentially. This is the way the credit card companies, I'm not saying, we didn't have parents that were going to step in, but I'm just saying this is the way they look at us if you're stereotyping a group of people in college. So the credit card companies look at you like you have less risk while you're in college. So that's why now they've changed the rules and laws. I used to be surprised at how many kids at the University of Georgia were lined up to sign up for a credit card for a free bag of potato chips that you could go to the grocery store and buy for 89 cents at the time, because you could get all, if you had a loyalty card or whatever. But there would be kids lined up for these credit cards. I realized after I graduated college, it was much harder to get a credit card than if I would have signed up. But my parents had me so scared of getting a credit card that I didn't take advantage of it. Yeah. Now, with this said, let me give you a cautionary tale. If you are going to sign up for the credit card in college, do not lose your mind. I mean, because your credit limit's probably going to be $1,000 or $2,000 because you don't have a lot of income. Don't go fake your life. Don't fake life starting in college and then get a bear that's going to sit on your shoulder because you have all this debt and the interest and everything else. Because credit cards are definitely dangerous instruments, like a knife, that you have to be very careful as you're using them.
Yeah, length of credit history is one we see people a lot of times inadvertently harm themselves. So they hear that every year you can go out to annualcreditreport.com and you can pull a free copy of your credit report, and they go do that. And they say, oh man, I've got this credit card listed here that I opened up back when I was in college, and I should just simplify and consolidate my financial life. So I'm going to close down everything I'm not using. Well, even though that's very well intended and it sounds like a great idea, if you do shut down some of those old credit lines, and really you just want to leave open the single oldest. You don't need 10 credit lines from back there because they just look at the single oldest that you have. So I would recommend keeping that open. You still need to keep an eye on it and make sure you're monitoring that account. But even if it's not something that you still use, it makes sense to leave it open. And we see people do that all the time where they close it down inadvertently.
And here's another planning opportunity. It just came to me. We didn't even have this in the show notes. Because I've done this. My first credit card was a Six Flags credit card. Because it makes sense. When you're 22, 23, where are your priorities? Let's go riding roller coasters, obviously. So, but as I've gotten older, I didn't go to Six Flags as much.
Right.
We kind of changed that. So I didn't want to close the Six Flags credit card because that was my oldest one.
Right.
So what you can do is that you can call realize a lot of the credit cards are run by the same banks. So you can call that credit card company, the main one, and say, look, I'm currently in Bank XY's Six Flags card. I don't really go to Six Flags anymore. Does Bank XY have some sibling credit cards that maybe have a benefit that would, be better for me at this stage of my life? And I was able to keep that credit line open, still keep the age of it, but transition it to a different credit card with some different benefits that was more useful. And it's a win-win for everybody. You get to keep that old credit line open. But for the credit card company, you actually probably will now start using this credit card again. So that's why they are definitely have some motivation to try to help you with that transition. So that way you just don't have an abandoned credit card out there because we don't want to open up too many of these things, but it at least keeps everything as efficient and productive as possible.
Well, and that's a great segue. You said you don't want to open up too many. I think what the last two are pretty small. The next 10% of your credit score is made up by how many credit inquiries you have, how many lines of credit you have out there. So just like you said, that person in college that was signing up every time there was a free T-shirt or slice of pizza, were really hurting themselves. So that's one. You just want to make sure you don't have tons of inquiries out there applying for new credit because it makes it look like you're in trouble.
Yeah, and be careful around those life transition moments. As I mentioned, I've already kind of given one clue. Mortgages, when you go buy a brand new house, there's so much incentive, or it feels like life happens so quickly, is that not only do you have the utilities pulling on your credit line, you have the mortgage company pulling on your credit line, and then you need to buy furniture for the house. So you have that potential, because they say, oh, hey, if you sign up for our in-store credit card, we'll give you, 15% off your bill or 10% off your bill, and you don't pay any payments for 7 years. And you're like, how is that possible? But they're pulling off your credit. All these things add up. If you're doing 3, 4, 5 new lines of credit, it looks like you are trying to go and get so much money that it makes your lifestyle look like you're in jeopardy.
Yeah.
So be very careful on those new lines of credit. And as you've already said, that's 10% is the new credit. And then the last is credit mix. There's the last 10%. They want to see a mix of success from people having revolving credit and installment loans. Revolving credit are your credit cards. That's like a credit line. It's sitting out there. You have access to a certain level of money that you can borrow off of. So that's your revolving credit. And then installment loans by the way, when you're young and you pay off your first car loan, your credit score will pop. I mean, it can pop.
Yeah,
I've seen it where I know for me personally, it's nice when you pay off something you can see, because I think when in the beginning it makes it to the credit agencies like, oh, this person does fulfill their obligations. Sure. Now, if your first loan is your car loan, it can have the reverse element. If it's your oldest line of credit fell off, that could hurt you based upon length of credit history. But if that's not your oldest loan, it should hopefully help you out. So let's talk about now the big thing of why most of you, and the timely thing of why most of you are probably watching the show today or listening to the show, is how to monitor, protect your identity and credit. And this one is so relevant because of what's going on with Equifax. Sure. And I hate to because we like our information to be evergreen. I mean, I want you guys, even though we've had this Equifax breach, I want people to be able to come back 3 years from now and say, this is still good content. But this is such a big breach that I think we do need to give some specific information that pertains to this moment in time. So the first thing, because there's been a lot of information on this, and especially on Twitter and social media, is that Equifax did a bumblehead move at the beginning of this whole thing. When they disclosed the breach, it then came out that you could go to their website at Equifax.com and you could go see if you were impacted.
And how would you do that, Brian?
Well, you clicked through some links, but here's the problem, and this is where they really made a PR just horrible, tone deaf mistake here, is that to click through the screens to check the eligibility of their credit rating protection, their credit service protection, because that's what they're advertising, is they're offering this credit protection monitoring service, and to run your social to see if you were impacted. You had to click through an agreement that you'd essentially sign away your ability to sue Equifax in the future.
Right.
So there was a lot of personal finance advocates out there that were saying, do not go to their website and provide the information to see if you're on the list, because you might be giving away some of your rights by doing that. The good news is that Equifax caught a clue, and they realized this is probably a little tone deaf with the timing of it. We've had such a huge breach. So now you can go check your credit score, or not credit score, but you could go check to see if you were impacted by this breach. And so that's what we'll put a link on the website on moneyguy.com so you can see where you need to go on Equifax's website, or it's just as easy. I would give you, but I'm looking at this, it's not a hard domain name, but it's just easier to tell you, either go to Google and type in or Equifax.com, and then you follow the links, or just go to moneyguy.com and we'll have a link to the eligibility site. But go, and all it's going to ask you to do is put in your last name and then the last 6 of your social security number. And when you type in your last name and last 6, it's going to quickly pop up, yes, you were impacted, or no, you were not impacted. Now, guess what? I don't win anything. I just don't. I mean, we bootstrap most things around here. I'm just not a lucky guy.
Right,
There's a reason.
We've yet to hit the Powerball.
We don't hit Powerballs. When I go to casinos, it's more to watch people because I just know that they don't build these beautiful facilities off of the good luck of Brian Preston. Right. So I was impacted. My wife was impacted. Bo, how about you?
I was likely impacted.
Well, that's the wording.
And my wife also was likely impacted. So if this thing is 1 for 2, we're batting 4 for 4 right now.
Yeah,
so there's a foursome out there somewhere listening. It's like, hey, none of us got impacted. We're great.
Well, we've had some clients who've reached out to us, and that's where the husband was impacted, but the wife was not impacted.
So if you checked and the answer was no, where do you go from there? What's the next? What are some things to think about if you're
if you likely were not impacted, then you need to take more of the traditional look of credit monitoring. And here's the cool thing with the way technology is now. This is much easier. You can keep up with your scores, reports, and activity much easier than the past. In the past, and Bo, you just gave the clue, the best thing we used to tell people, what's the website you could go to get your credit rating?
It's actually www.annualcreditreport.com.
And you can still do that and go get an annual credit report sent to you free of charge.
Yep.
You're all entitled to it once a year. Some states even allow more than that.
And it's once from each of the agencies. So if you want to spread it out over the course of the year, you can spread out the 3 over the course of the year.
Yeah, and we'll talk about what those 3 are in just a second. But it's going to allow you to see all the different credit lines, how old they are you paying your debts on time, what they are looking at when anybody if you need to go get new credit, what it looks like to them. But there's also new services that are completely free and do a pretty good job of keeping up with your credit. And I like Credit Karma. Credit Karma is something I've signed up for in the past. It's really cool that every week you can go in there and see if your credit score has changed. You can see what's impacting it. They'll even have some tutorials on when they analyze your credit of what's probably lowering your score, behaviors you can do to increase it. Now, of course, they're also going to try to hit you up for a credit card if you want to go get a new credit card. So that's how they're paying for all this stuff. But if you can just put that in the background and understand that there is a valuable service to monitoring it.
And I've noticed, Brian, even sometimes when I go in to pay my credit card, a lot of the credit card companies now are even showing you a glimpse into what your credit score is and stuff.
The first one I think that started doing that was like Discover Card. Mm-hmm. They were putting it, but now I notice most of my credit cards, the banks now provide a link to your credit score where you can be proactive. A lot of the same data that's on Credit Karma you can find through some of those credit card websites as well. But I have a lot of people who reach out and ask us, they say, well, should we pay for a service? You're telling me all the free stuff, but should we pay? Because when I go to LifeLock, their website, or even each one of the credit reporting agencies has a service that you could pay around $10 a month. And LifeLock is between $10 to $30. I think it's actually like $9.99, $19.99, $29.99. So it's basically $10 to $30, different levels. They do go deeper in what type of credit monitoring services they're doing for you. But you have to ask yourself, is it worth paying $10 to $30 a month to watch your service when they're not as strong as a credit freeze? And I'm going to explain what a credit freeze is in a minute. But if you're the type of person that is willing to pay, $10 to $30 a month, you obviously have some concerns. You have some fears. You have some things that make you want to be very proactive. Well, if you already have that mentality, and we know that no matter how good the credit monitoring service is, it's still not as strong as a credit freeze, you might be just wired in a risk-adverse mindset that a credit freeze could be your friend, because it doesn't cost a ton. We'll talk about the fees in a minute on a credit freeze. And then the thaw fees, yes, there's fees, but you got a lot of credit fee, freeze charges and thaw charges before you reach $10 to $30 a month.
So credit freeze, you're talking about that thing where you don't use your credit card, you put in a cup of water and you put it in the freezer. Is that what is a credit freeze?
Yeah, we're going to talk. And what's funny is that it is kind of, I get that visual because there are quite a few people I'm fans of too that are consumer advocates, that they talk about when you have no self-discipline. There are people that advocate putting your credit cards in the freezer in a block of ice. I mean, you've heard those, right?
Oh, yeah.
Heard people, but no, and I don't know if it's inspired by that, but a true credit freeze basically means, and let's go ahead and transition. If you check on that Equifax eligibility and it says, yes, you may have been impacted, let's transition now to the next part of the conversation is, what is a credit freeze? Because it's something you might want to consider. A credit freeze means that your credit is being taken out of circulation, meaning that yes, your existing credit, people who you have credit with, your mortgage company, your credit cards, your auto loans, they're still going to continue to get reports from their credit reporting agencies on you. So life as it is does not change. However, all future, anybody who wants access to your credit, you're locked down. I mean, and that's why here's the thing. Your Credit Karma apps and other things that constantly go out there and grab your credit, they don't work as well once you credit freeze your account. Because remember, you're taken out of circulation. Your data is no longer being shared. It's on lockdown unless they come to you and get the PIN, because that's what happens when they freeze your credit. Each one of the credit reporting agencies will provide you with a secure PIN that you have to provide to the credit agency to thaw. It's get the visual of thaw out your credit so that person can actually see what type of person you'd be to lend to or to work with. So that's what it is, essentially taking your credit and taking it away from the general population, so that the only way people can see your credit is if they do completely unthaw your credit freeze. So you're probably saying, well, okay, if this thing takes me out and this is going to protect me from identity theft, are there some downsides?
Yeah, there's gotta be some negatives, right?
Before I talk about the cons, I think that we should mention Social Security numbers are supposed to be super secretive. Mm-hmm. I feel like we are getting to this point in society. It's kind of a full circle. Here's the thing, Bo. You don't remember this because you're younger than me.
Oh, yeah.
Most people, I know in Georgia this was the case, most people's driver's license numbers in the past used to be their Social Security
numbers. Yeah, you told me that, and that just seems so foreign to me. That seems crazy.
It's just the way things were, and I don't know if it's because it was simpler times, data wasn't transmitted as efficiently, but obviously that became a big no-no.
Sure.
Don't make your driver's license number your Social Security number. But don't you feel like we are getting to the point that because we've had all these data breaches and everything else, Social Security numbers are just not safe anymore?
Yeah, they're just not as private as they used to be.
They don't seem like I feel like they're more on display than they've ever been. So that's why, unfortunately, it's putting it back on you, the consumer, to be your own advocate to protect yourself. And that's why these credit freezes are powerful against identity theft, because they lock you down even if somebody has access to your Social Security number, even if they have access to your date of birth and your address and all the pertinent information that they would need to replicate who you are. If they don't have that PIN, it makes the data not as powerful and somewhat useless when it comes to getting more credit.
Okay, so you're selling me on it. So what are some of the downsides? What are some of the things I need to think about if I'm thinking about freezing my credit?
The first one, fees.
Okay, so it's not a free thing to do.
Now, some states are free, but every state's because we want to make this simpler. We're going to allow every state to have different rules on this, but it is interesting that the fees typically range, I believe it's somewhere between $3 to $10 per person. And remember, you got 3 credit agencies that are the base level that you want, reporting agencies that you want to talk to. So you're talking about this could cost you, $30. Now, Equifax is waiving some of these fees because of the data breach.
Sure.
And I know when I did this, because I've taken this serious enough since I'm one of the impacted parties, it cost me $750 for each one of them minus the Equifax when I was looking at it. So every state's a little different, but there are fees. That's a negative. The other negative is your credit monitoring services that you've loved and come to appreciate, like Credit Karma, they don't work as well anymore because they realize they can't go in and look at your history because now your credit file is out of circulation. So that's going to be kind of it's a little bit of a pain in the fact that you don't have access to some of the tools that you've come to believe and use and enjoy. It's also, there's a headache factor, is that every time you want to use credit, if you're buying a car, if you need to go, get a new job, if you go and you got to go let your landlord look at your credit, all those behaviors that I was talking about, that day-to-day life where your credit comes into play, once you have a credit freeze, now you're going to have to go and thaw your credit so that these interested parties can have access to look at what's going on.
And there are even some things you don't think about, I think, right? So like we know a lot of big institutions now are allowing for like electronic signatures on paperwork and that sort of thing. Well, one of the ways they verify your identity is they go out to the credit reporting agencies and have you verify information. If your credit is frozen, you can no longer use some of those services offered by like DocuSign or VeriSign or that sort of thing. So it will make logistically some things that we've gotten used to a little bit harder.
Yeah, there's definitely a headache factor where you are taking yourself back technology wise when you freeze your credit. And that's why this is a heavy, heavy decision to know, do you want to do this? And does the weight of the breach outweigh the convenience factor? And that's been a hard thing, and I think it's very personal for people to figure this out.
So if I do want to thaw, how long does it take, and what are some of the steps?
Well, let me give you some tips as well as how this all works. Is that the tips is that a lot of times when you go open up a new line of credit, or if your employer wants to see your credit, they don't go to all three credit reporting agencies. They typically only want to go to one. So you need to ask, each person who wants to look at your credit, what is the credit reporting agency that you go to? And then hopefully you could get away with just thawing one instead of thawing all three of them. So I want to give that tips before we completely make everybody hate this whole process too much. And I also want to share that there are people that shouldn't do a credit freeze. But the credit freeze is for people who, for work, are constantly having to open up new lines of credit or let people go and look at their social credit.
I'm thinking like real estate or something like that.
Yeah,
probably.
Or somebody who's a part of a purchasing department, or your company. You are your company, self-employed, and you're having to go open up lines and other things. And the fees of thawing as well as the headache could outweigh the benefits you're getting. And if that's the case, you probably want to consider doing a really strong, credit monitoring service to see if you could protect yourself. But for everybody else, this is something you need to personally figure out if it makes sense for you.
Now, if I have an already established line of credit, I have a credit card, but I'm someone who I want to increase how good my credit is, right? And I want to increase my limit. If I have my credit frozen, can I still do that, or do I have to unthaw the credit? So when I did a little bit of Google research on that, it looks like there wasn't any consistency. It kind of depends on the institution who's offering the credit card. Is that kind of what you found as well?
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that it all depends upon the institution. If your behavior might be good enough that they could give you a courtesy increase, but if they are going to go pull your credit, there's a chance that they want to go see your outside behavior as well. Because realize I've gotten in trouble with a few of you guys, and we're going to come back to how you thaw and how long it takes and so forth. But a few of you got mad on when we've done credit card episodes in the past. I've had a few of you that you've gone to go get some of these rebate cards that we've shared in the past, but when you go open up that new credit limit or new credit line, it has impacted your other, because you changed your credit score. It impacted some of your other credit lines. So realize they are all interconnected. So even though your creditor gets to see your behavior with them, they want to know sometimes when you ask for more credit, what does your behavior look like with your other credit card companies? So if that's the case, there could be some impact with this credit freeze. And that's a great point to bring forward, Bo. So let's talk about what does it mean when you freeze? Because that sounds like, when you thaw your frozen credit, that sounds like it could be an involved process. The good news is that there's 1-800 numbers as well as online access, as long as you have the PIN and all the pertinent information, where it should take only a few minutes to thaw your credit. So this is hopefully be more of an inconvenience factor of the time of reaching out to find out who they work with and thawing it and then freezing it back. And the fees, those fees, like I said, are $3 to $10 to set up the freeze, and then typically $0 to $10 to thaw the credit.
As we sit right now, middle of September with what's going on, any disclaimers you would put out there to folks who are thinking about maybe either freezing or thawing their credit right now if they hear this podcast in the next few days? Anything they should know when they contact these agencies? Is the process slowed down or bottlenecked at all? Because
here's the thing. I have made the personal decision for my family, my wife and I, that we are going to freeze our credit. And I'm only a third of the way through. And I've been trying to do this for the last 2 or 3 days. Here's the problem. Everybody is trying to freeze because this breach, like I said, this is evergreen information. Your social security number, your date of birth, that stuff is not changing. So this is information that these criminals could come back 5 years, 6 years from now and still use against you. So it makes it more, it's a material impact. So because I think people have been doing a good job of scaring people or making them aware of what's going on, they've overloaded the system to the point that there are even conspiracy theorists that are saying, are the credit reporting agencies slowing down this? Because realize when you take your credit report record out of circulation, that impacts these credit reporting agencies. Because how do they get money? They get money by selling access to people with credit
Sure.
to credit card companies and others. I don't think that that's necessarily what's going on, but I do think that is a true impact of to all these people loading up these servers that it's hard to freeze your credit
Sure.
right now. So I've already kind of mentioned who should not freeze the credit, but I think it's worth reading just or going over one more time is that if you're accessing often your credit lines and your credit scores for work or have multiple new lines that will be opened, it really might not be in the best interest because of all the fees to thaw as well as to set up the structure. So be very careful of that. So let's talk about now the actual implementation of this. If you are going to consider moving forward with the freezing, you need to understand there's 3 big credit reporting agencies. There's TransUnion, there's Equifax, and then there's Experian. And Equifax was the one that had the breach, and they're the ones that are waiving the freeze fees right now. But unfortunately, you still are going to be subject to fees through TransUnion and Experian. And realize all 3 of these have separate processes.
Sure.
Now, I want you to go to there's two places you can go. You can go to our website, and we're going to put a link up to if you go to moneyguy.com. But one of the best resources I have found, and they have been doing a fabulous job of being proactive with this, is our old friend back in Atlanta, Clark Howard.
Oh, Clark,
Clark Howard has been doing, he's a consumer advocate. If he's not syndicated in your area, Clark is a guy who's been on the radio for decades in Atlanta. And he does an incredible job of really advocating for people. And he's got these credit freeze guides that are on his website that we're going to make sure we link to on the Money Guy website as well. But go to moneyguy.com. But Clark Howard is doing a great job with his credit freeze guides. A lot of people will be shocked to know there's actually 2 other credit reporting agencies above and beyond these 3. These are a little more obscure, but it's something you might want to consider. And we'll put links on these on our website as well. There's Checks Systems, which is a check verification service and a credit reporting agency, as well as Innovis, which is a provider of consumer data and consumer reporting, a credit reporting agency also for U.S. citizens. So we're going to put links to both Checks Systems as well as Innovis so that you can have all 5 of those locked down and freeze. If you decide to do this, we're going to go ahead and help you figure out your system. And here's another piece of advice, because when I had to really come to terms, because I love my gizmos with Credit Karma and the apps that I've used, is I was like, this is going to be a big deal. This is going to be a decision that I'm going to make today, but it's going to impact me for the next decade. And I said, okay, I need to be organized about this. When they send you these pins, guys, you need to have a system for where you're storing this stuff so you can have access to it. You know, we're fortunate that we have, vaults and other things online that we can all secure and protected for data management. I've set up an entire file folder for my family to track and keep up with these pins, because it's going to be something that's very important that you're going to need access to in case you do need to thaw out your credit for some of these life events that could come.
So organization is your friend. This is not a set it and forget it type thing.
Well, yeah, because I'm worried you're going to get this pin that they send you, or give you over the phone or email you, however it's delivered. And then you need to understand that this isn't something that's going, yes, you can go and recover your pin. It's not, if you lose it, oh my gosh, the world is not ended. But it just adds that process I said is going to take minutes to thaw your credit is going to be stretched out. So this is something you need to treat like an important document when you get these PIN numbers. I wanted to kind of close out because I know we're getting long on time here. Some other impacts of this breach that I haven't seen a lot of press on is tax returns. I did taxes for multiple decades, but I sold my tax business about 5 years ago. And one of the trends that I saw in my final years of doing tax preparation was identity theft of your Social Security number, meaning filing a tax return before you file your tax return, essentially front-running your tax return filing and getting refunds of several $1,000s. I'm worried now that they have your dates of birth, they have your driver's license number, they have your Social Security number, that you're probably going to see even more pronounced increase of these false tax filings. And that scares me even more so, because what is your biggest fear? I know one of mine is I hate getting letters from the IRS in the mail, because that just brings fear and dread in my heart. So I always try to make sure that I do everything right to make sure that Uncle is happy with me. And I'm worried that this identity protection is going to get harder and harder. And the good news is the government has a solution to this. It's called a identity protection PIN that the government will allow you to sign up to get they call it an IP PIN for identity protection PIN with the IRS. Here's the bad news. You can only get this if you've been a victim, meaning somebody's already done this to you and front-run you on filing your taxes, or you live in one of their states that they're slowly rolling this out to. And those currently, that's only the state of Georgia, state of Florida, and D.C., Washington, D.C. If you don't live in those, if you live outside of that, you cannot be proactive. And I put, a lot of you probably saw on Twitter, I put out a link to our president as well as to the IRS helpline saying, guys, in light of this Equifax breach, wouldn't it be nice if they accelerated the rollout of this program to where all people who are very proactive with their personal finances could go and get this IP PIN?
Sure.
Because I would sure like to lock down my tax filing because, I think that is a very easy, low-lying fruit area for a criminal element to go set up and get thousands of dollars. And it's a pain. You can imagine trying to convince the IRS that, hey, that was not me that filed that $2,000 refund.
Sure.
It just creates a lot of headache and heartache. And I would really, if any of our listeners are in the government, help us be proactive with this. This would be a helpful thing if we could roll out this IP PIN sooner than what the government's already doing. And then the last thing that I have seen in the media, but I want to just, put it on your radar, is credit freezes for minor children. A lot of people you probably immediately jump to when you hear this, you're like, well, what about my babies? Are they going to be impacted by this? And I immediately, at first, I was like, okay, I'm freezing my credit. Should I freeze the kids as well? But here's the thing. A lot of times these credit reporting agencies don't even know your kids exist yet because these are dormant. They have not been filed. There's no credit file out there for your children. But it's a fearful thing because, and I pulled some data from Clark Howard's site as well as some other places that I researched. And here's what the data found is that children are 51 times more likely to be subject to identity theft versus adults.
Wow.
And then as Clark put on his website, he mentions that 1 in 10 kids has their identity stolen by 18. So that's a 10% rate. So that stuff scared me. I was like, okay, I'm going to run out there and immediately freeze all my kids' stuff. And that's possible in all 50 states with both Experian and Equifax. TransUnion only allows you, because not every state has legislation passed or laws passed that allow you to freeze the credit of minors. We'll put a link on the website where you can go check. If you go to moneyguy.com to see if your state's one of them, there's only, not all of them are covered at this point, so you probably want to go check. But I'm putting a hold on doing the freeze for my kids. And the reason is I went on the Equifax link to check the impacted Social Security numbers, typed in my kids' last name, the last 6 digits of social. Neither one of them were impacted. So if I had to guess, I don't think my kids have credit files even created.
Sure.
Even though they have Social Security numbers, it means nobody's doing anything shady. I don't want to create a file because you realize for a credit reporting agency to do this freeze, they're going to have to go create, establish, and set up. And because of all these breaches, I don't know that this is the last one. It seems like this is happening more and more often with technology and the advancement. Why open up the door to something that I think could be trouble in the future? Yeah. But that's a personal decision. Everybody needs to take that. And there's articles, there's all kind of resources. But I would definitely think about before, measuring twice, cut once on freezing the kids' credit, and also think about the identity protection on your IRS with, because that's scary when you're filing your taxes. So we covered a ton, Bo. You can sense you always do such a great job of giving us some summarizing some of these tangents and other things we go on. Anything you'd like to add as we close down the show today?
I think in conclusion, this is what we'd say. There's a big thing that's just happened, and you need to be educated about what it was. And there are some steps that you can take that if you do put in a little bit of extra effort, you go a little bit further, you can protect yourself. If you go out to the website, moneyguy.com, we're going to have links on how you can work through some of this, how you can check to see if you're effective. The big thing is you can't just be an ostrich and bury your head in the sand, or when you do have to address it, it's too late to address it. So as with most things in life, if you're a little proactive, a little out in front of it, you can make sure you keep everything in line.
And what I love, our listeners are so good at being proactive. We've done podcasts on the power of a plan. You have a planner's mentality when you're thinking ahead and doing things. This is just another thing you have to unfortunately add in your toolbox of things to understand. You've got to know how credit is a tool in your financial life, how to protect it, and then make sure that it's working for you and that you're not the victim of something that's going on with all this nefarious activity that's out there in the world these days. So, guys, we have loaded ourselves up with information on this. If you need to know you have somebody in your corner that can help you work through these type of things. We love to take relationships to the next level. We have clients in the majority of the country now. So definitely go check us out, moneyguy.com, aboundwealth.com. Reach out to one of those contact sections. We're always looking for great clients. And then I would encourage you, if you like what you hear, because realize this is not a corporate thing. We don't have a big Fortune 500 company behind us. You guys are the masters of our destiny of where we go with things. I mean, you are part of the family. That's why I don't use that word lightly. So we definitely need your help on giving us reviews, signing up on the websites. If you go to moneyguy.com, don't forget we're giving away $1,000 through YouTube. So if you subscribe to YouTube, mid-November, we're going to, pull somebody, let them know that they won $1,000. And if you look at the odds, this is better than Powerball, guys. I mean, we're talking about your chances are 1 in 1,000 to 2,000. I mean, it's very low. It's great threshold where you could really have an impact. Like I said, we want to thank everybody, the hundreds that have signed up since our last show, but we want to turn it into thousands. So please go check it out on the website, moneyguy.com, and then go check us out on the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/MoneyGuyShow. So check it out. You guys are our family that has made us successful. We can't say thank you enough. I'm your host, Brian Preston.